question for everyone, show of hands. How many today still experience some frustration or challenges on executing on your projects? Come on, be honest. Right? Well, when David talked about the whole project management industry, and when we both started our programs in project management training, everyone thought, oh, that's going to solve the issue. Right? We're going to train all these people, we're going to get them PMP certified, and every project's going to be delivered on schedule, on budget, on scope, and everyone is going to be super, super happy. Well, guess what? 20 years later, and there's still frustration with project execution. And what I'm going to talk about today is 3 things. Culture and project management, how they intersect, how they impact each other. What is organizational culture? Everyone has a definition of organizational culture. And culture in practice. So a couple of case studies. When culture is assessed during the life cycle of a transformation project, what impact does it have on the results and the execution of that culture? Good with everyone? Yeah? Okay, well, let's get started. 20 minutes is going to go by really fast. So culture clarity. Just, 12 years ago, I was working with an organization called IPS, and they were a partner of Stanford University Center for Professional Development. And it was in their engineering group. And they created a program called Stanford Advanced Project Management. And they used the term project management because everyone understands that. But what it really was about was how do you execute programs and projects in an organization. And we'd have executives from all over the world come into the Stanford campus, and they talk about their challenges, and every single one, and literally would talk about the culture and the people, and how frustrating it was not to be able to execute on the goals and the strategies that they wanted for their organization. And ultimately the conversation always came back to culture. So I thought, wouldn't it be interesting to actually put a picture to culture? Because every single executive had a different definition of culture. So basically for us, organizational culture is not climate. And when we talk about climate, we talk about the management decisions that set the tone for an organization. So that could be your structures, your policies, your rote systems, your processes. But culture really is about the attitudes and behaviors that I need to display on a day-to-day basis if I'm going to fit in and be successful in an organization. So when I walk through the doors of TELUS, what are the espoused values? What are my beliefs and what are the beliefs of the organization? And do they mesh? Do I feel I'm connecting to those values? And what attitudes and behaviors are going to be expected of me to be successful in that organization? So that's our definition of culture. And as I've been doing work for 12 years in organizational culture, it comes down to really about the decisions I make every single day on the job. And we'll talk about what constructive cultures look like and what can get in the way of driving a highly constructive, engaged, high-performing, accountable, collaborative, team-based culture. Don't all those words sound great? Right? Accountable, achievement-oriented, teamwork, we cooperate, I matter in the organization. It's not just about the task. Right? Leaders actually hear my voice when I have an idea. And so constructive cultures will drive more effective project execution. And I will share a case study with one of the Metrolinx projects when we brought all of the organizations together to create one culture for the project team. So when we think about culture, what is expected around here? How am I going to fit in and be successful? There are many layers of culture. We did work with Seagate Technologies all over the world, and each of these layers actually drove certain assumptions into the organization. So when we think about the layers of culture, really we think about I as an individual, what are the attitudes and behaviors I bring in every day? Do I lead myself to deliver and be accountable on the goals that I have as an individual? How are my managers impacting me? What are the decisions they're making? How are their leaders impacting them, and how it cascades into the organization? And how do we function as a team in an organization? So what was really interesting at Seagate Technologies is no matter where you went in the world, and we assessed 23,000 people all over the world, the pattern of behavior was similar. And why do you think that is? Anyone? Project work is similar, but an even more important thing. The impact of leaders on the organization started at the top. And the behaviors that they espoused cascaded into the organization. And we saw some differences depending what country you were in. But for the most part, the pattern of the behavior of the organization was consistent in what people believed the culture of the organization was and what they needed to do, fit in, and be successful. And we look at culture from very different lenses. We make assumptions about things because there isn't clarity in the communication process. We don't understand why decisions are made, but all of a sudden we hear we're implementing a new system. Right? And there isn't any of the communication and transparency behind some of the decisions that are being made in organizations. What are our behavior norms? What do we observe around us? And we typically will look at culture and determine how we're going to fit in within 15 feet of our desk. And then, of course, the symbols around us. And the other thing is, culture is impacted by leaders up to 65%. The impact and influence leaders have on how they lead other people, whether they're direct reports or their peers, is impacted actually by leadership. So the decisions, how I behave, my expectations will impact how others react to me on my team or across the organization. So lots of tools out there. How many people have seen this radar screen? Oh, I've got newbies. Okay. It looks quite complicated, but at the heart of the OCI circumplex, this is a tool that we use in our practice. We use others, but this is the major one. And the reason we use it is because it's actually research-based, it's validated, and organizations get normed against other high-performing organizations. There are 1,000 organizations whose data goes into the circumplex. We call it a circumplex or a radar screen. And you are benchmarked against those organizations. And so what we look at is there are 3 styles in the OCI. We call it the OCI. And each of the styles represents a set of behaviors, collective behaviors that impact the organization in its ability to execute on its goals and the strategies. I'll start off with the blue. The higher the blue in the assessment, the more constructive the culture is. The more people feel that they're accountable for the goals that they've established with their leaders. They feel good about achieving those goals. I have a focus on excellence, and I have a focus on being accountable and responsible as part of the team for the organization. So what we want to see is blues as high as possible. And what we look for is the blues to be higher than that third concentric circle in the middle, which is the 50th percentile. Each of those circles represents a percentage which organizations are renormed against. What gets in the way of blue is passive aggressive and passive defensive behaviors. So if I walk in every day and it's an organization that I am not empowered to make decisions, I have to seek approval. Decisions aren't being pushed to my level, on the job. What happens is I start depending on my leader and manager for everything. I feel I'm stifled. I feel I don't have a voice. Those approval behaviors start creating conventional behaviors. I'm not going to take any risks. I'm going to do things the way they've always been done because we've got all these structures and policies and procedures. Conventional behaviors start driving highly dependent behavior. I'm going to shift responsibilities. I'm going to focus on what I'm told to do every single day, even though I have a better idea. And avoidance behaviors are quite dangerous in organizations. And why that is I'm going to come in, lay low, do my job, and not give you the best of who I am. The higher the greens, the less engaged people are in the organization, employees are in the organization. The higher the green, the more we hold back discretionary effort. And what does that do to an organization? It stifles innovation. It stifles achievement-oriented. People will hold back, based on research, 29% of discretionary effort when we see high green scores. You multiply it by the number of employees, and what impact does that have on productivity? Huge impact. Huge impact. And we do this to ourselves. We create policies, we create processes, we over-engineer them, and those green behaviors are driven by the aggressive behaviors in oppositional, power, competitive, and perfectionistic. By the way, perfectionistic behaviors in an organization can stifle achievement-oriented organizations. We're not saying that there can't be some perfectionistic behavior. And so in the reds, we say you need to have some red behaviors up to that third circle because it's good tension, right? We can have great discussions about an issue and walk away and still feel that we're collaborating and being cooperative with each other. And so red behaviors, when you have some of them, create very good tension in an organization. And leaders typically will drive those red behaviors, which will have an impact on the green. So what we want to see is high blues, greens as low as possible, and reds, we want to see some reds. The other thing the tool talks about is that you have to have a focus as leaders on both the task, getting business done, as well as the people. So I call it the head and the heart. And when you have a balance between the two, it's amazing what you can accomplish. The greens actually can kill an organization. I'll have a funny story and I can share this with you. Anyone from OPG here? No? So new CEO, Jeff Lyash, probably one of the best CEOs, quite frankly, I've met. I think it was in his second month. They have, as everyone knows, the Darlington plant is being refurbished, $12.8 billion. Huge project. I mean, to look at their project chart is incredible, right? It's as bigger than that screen, right? 10 years. And he recognized that OPG had over-processed and over-engineered themselves. And he was looking to laminate the project life cycle and went down to the print shop, CEO, right? And the young man behind the desk said, "Sir, before I can do this, do you have the form that has the 2 signatures I need to laminate this?" And that was the first signal that Jeff realized that there were too many processes in the place. 2 signatures. He was following what he was told to do. Where was the good judgment that I could use to say, you know, this is our CEO. Maybe he really doesn't need 2 signatures. And so that was very telling. And that was one of the journeys as they started to look at how they're going to shift their culture from being highly technical, highly bureaucratic, highly aggressive, perfectionistic, to this culture where people use good judgment, were accountable to outcomes and results and not just activities, that there was both technical leadership and facilitated leadership, so leaders had the opportunity to coach and mentor and not just tell, because telling as leaders is so much easier. And so as they're going on their culture journey, they recognized that they had put many things in their way. So using the tool and using a values tool, they really uncovered what were the barriers that were going to get in their way of executing on the culture that they wanted and really driving what they called the one OPG culture. So culture gets in the way. And when you get a picture of what your culture is and the barriers that may exist, it will actually help you eliminate those barriers. And who do you think has the answers? You got it. It's not just on the leadership or the management. Your frontline workers have the answers. And I'll share a Seagate story. So, when we look at culture, we look at the values of the organization. The more aligned organization's values are with the organization from a mission and philosophy, the closer the current culture will be to the ideal. And your current culture will actually impact your outcomes, right? So from an individual perspective, from a group perspective or a team perspective, and finally the whole organization. So cascading goals, designing strategies into the organization, understanding where things will get in the way of that strategy execution. And that's an example of an ideal culture and a current culture. And you can see the difference in the two, right? Not high green, high blue, hardly any blue, and those red and green behaviors were getting in the way. And the causal factors for some of the issues the organization had to actually execute on their enterprise goals and strategies. So, we were asked by one of the Metrolinx organizations to bring all of their partners together to form a team culture for the project. And it was really interesting because we had Dufferin Construction, we had Aecon, we had the municipality, and everyone had their own culture. Everyone had their own norms. So how do you bring these organizations collectively together to focus on what is it that they want to accomplish in the project? And in fact, we worked with 3 of the major Metrolinx projects. And so what we did was we wanted to establish commitments and approach, build goodwill and trust among the team members, enable the team to anticipate and determine how best to resolve problems through informal conflict resolution, and finally determine the partnering program requirements to really effectively deliver. So those were the purpose of the workshop, and all the partners agreed that that was the outcome. And then the project team was established to building a culture that was bringing the best of all the partner cultures together, working towards developing the culture of the one team, and then identifying gaps that would impact the success of the project. So we went through these steps, we assessed the culture of each organization, we debriefed each stakeholder to show them, and there was differences in the culture, but they all had a similar ideal culture. So that was the overall culture at the top of all organizations, and that's the data that came back from assessing all the project team members, and we knew there were some differences. So those differences were presented to the whole team, and the workshop was to determine how are they going to close the gap between the current and the ideal, generate a vision for the project, the risks associated to the projects, how they're going to manage the risks, strategies, and we designed actually with them a framework design on how they were going to deliver the project as a team. And then, of course, they went off and implemented. And if you notice, the current was not bad. There was some really good constructive behavior in the organization, which made the discussion much easier. And then, based on that, basically what this told us is people wanted to be holding each other accountable, that they wanted to be innovative, that they would take risk as required, that they wanted to create a group that thought of the client at the end, and they wanted to develop good relationships. So that was the assessment of the ideal, and this was their current, and we identified some behaviors that were going to get in the way of the project success. And so how are we going to reduce some of that green, reduce a little bit of that red, which would impact higher blues. And what we looked for is that affiliative. We wanted the affiliative to be higher because that's about collaboration, teamwork, and cooperation. So that was a big discussion for all the stakeholders in the project. So once we did that, we looked at, they defined their success vision of the project collectively, output that aligned to encourage the blue behaviors on the teams, and then risk assessments and strategies for the project, and finally, how were they going to communicate and what was their zipper plan. right, when there was conflicts or problems. So that was all established collectively by the partners, focused on driving that ideal culture. The discussion was all about that. And then the output was this, and I know it looks big and complicated. Really, it was understanding what was the vision, what were the goals they were going to achieve, by the way, aligned to the 4 constructive styles, and how are they going to keep the blue and make sure that the green and the red was healthy. So we identified all the people behaviors of that project team, and then how is this going to impact their communities and the businesses around them. So that was the output of the project, and it was incredible how they became aligned.